Okay. So this story is a story about how I got married to this woman that I saw on a webcam. Now keep in mind this is a completely true story. So, just don't doubt me or question anything I say. So, you know how in elementary school they not necessarily elementary school. For me individually is pre-K, but what's it called? Like when you daycare. Yeah, it's essentially daycare. So, you know how they have one of those days where basically they have one of those days where they get you guys in a circle and you think you're going to play Duck Duck Goose as you usually do, except this is not like that. This time they start pouring a salt circle around all of you. Yeah, no, the typical thing, that happens in elementary school. So, if you guys are still following me, essentially, what they do is, they pour the salt circle. Now, I don't remember what they said exactly, because keep in mind, this was daycare, and I was pretty young, about 4 or 3 or so. So, they said something, I don't remember what. But there was this guy that comes in, and you know how they have, I don't know if this happened to you guys a lot, but they did a lot of, big things with us, where they would bring in some guest, and he would talk about something, one time we had this basketball player, this other time we had, this guy from a church come in and talk to us about whatever just happened to be the theme of the day. But this guy that came in, thinking back, he was a bit of a shady character. I didn't actually, question it at the time, but yeah, he kind of, he had the fedora, the trench coat. He was ahead of his time now. Very, very ahead of his time. So I'm sitting there thinking, dude, one day I'm gonna dress just like that, and that's why I'm dressing just like that right now. But the point is, essentially, he summons a demon, just a demon, right there in the middle of the salt circle, and I'm just like, I'm getting out of here. So I turn around to leave this little duck goose circle, and I can't get past the salt because I start to put my hand out in front of it, and it shrivels up and dies. My hand is gone because I feel like a slug. You know what I'm saying? Like my hand just shrivels up and dies, and I can't use it anymore. And meanwhile, this demon is just feasting on all the little girls and boys in the circle, and I'm like, Susie, take my place in the stomach. So I take her and I just throw her in. I just throw her in the stomach of the demon. And then he's like, Weston. And I'm like, yeah, Mr. Demon. And he's like, thank you. And I'm like, you're welcome. So he spits out a little bone. I'm like, thanks. So I take the bone and I just stick it into the salt circle. And I brush away the salt. And then I try sticking my other hand in, and it's still there. It didn't disappear because there was no. It was hovering over the salt. It wasn't hovering over the salt, and the salt wall wasn't there anymore. So I could go out. So I did, but by doing so, I unleashed the demon. And he starts flying out, and then they're like, oh, God, there's a demon. Get Mr. Basket J in here. Mr. Michael Jordan. Mr. Michael Jackson Jordan. So he comes and he's like, He pulls out his basketball. Turns out it's full of salt, by the way. I had no idea that's what basketballs were full of at the time. Of course, now that I'm older, I of course know that every basketball has, just a massive load of salt in there. He takes it out. I'm thinking, hey, this guy is gonna just throw that salt all over that demon boy, and he gonna die. But no, he just starts ingesting all of the salt. Who does that? Because, just a single, salt shaker worth of salt is enough to kill you from dehydration. So, like, he, like, doesn't just dehydrate, because this, keep in mind, this is a basketball full of salt. He anti-hydrates. Like, the things around him start dehydrating as well. So I can feel, like, all of the water leaving my body, and, like, just dry bones, just, like, dry bones. He just comes up out of the belly of the beast, and he's like, yeehaw! So they kill Michael Jackson Jordan, and I'm sitting there thinking, holy shit, like, I gotta get out of here. So now my pre-K, well, my daycare had a roller coaster inside of it, right? So I'm riding on that thing like it's the little monorail, but little do I know, it goes in a circle. Like, it just goes in a circle. So I'm like, I got away, turns around, comes straight back. Right back where I started. So, what I do is I plant bombs, right? Just the school-administered bombs. This kind you get in standard, like standard bombs, right? I just pluck them on the thing, on the little rail, a little ways down the track. So, kablamo, I go derail, I'm driving down the road. And essentially, so I'm dodging traffic, right? And meanwhile, aliens are here to take up the demon and research him, cut out his organs, and then do a crop circle out of the organs. So I'm like, well, this takes care of the demon problem, but now I gotta take care of the alien problem. So I just take my roller coaster, and I'm not gonna explain how I do this, because I make a track as I'm going along, and I just shoot up into the sky, right? The sky is the limit, and I shoot up into the sky, and essentially, I take some moon rocks, and I'm like, these are my moon rocks. So I throw them down at the alien ship, and he's like, he was kind of disappointed. So I'm like, oh, what's wrong, Mr. Alien? And he's like, I spilt my milk. And I'm like, it's no use crying over spilled milk. And I slit his throat. So I take control of the alien ship. And I'm like, this is our Black History Month. So I fly over the demon, and I'm like, man, you're dead. Zap, he's dead. So now I'm sort of being seen as a terrorist. Heavy air quotes on that. So the army comes in, and I'm like, no, I'm just not doing this. So, like, I'm just like, this alien ship is just, okay, it's got 3 passageways. One is like, it leads, like, down this dark tunnel to, like, I don't even know where. The other one is just an escalator up. And the other is just an escalator down. So I'm like, eeny, miny, escalator up. So I go up the escalator that goes up. And when I'm up there, I find who else but King DDD in the flesh, and the bone, and the skin, and the feathers. He's sitting there, and he's like, waddle waddle. And I'm like, yo, Mr. King DDD, it's time to do your final smash. And he's like, hop, home, hop, home, hop, home, home, home. And all the little Waddle Dees come out, and they take, and then, like, they have a big army fight, right? It's like one of those little, like, things that I, like, when you're playing with, like, your little, like, army guy, your little plastic figure army guys. Except, like, way lamer, because it's, like, King DDD versus, like, the actual army. So, we won. That was good. But, essentially, so I'm like, yo, King DD, we got a good thing going on, you know what I'm saying? And he's like, waddle waddle. So I'm like, why don't you and I, we take this over to the capital of Washington. So we go to Seattle, and if that's the capital, I remember I was young at the time, I don't remember. And we're like, we start going down the streets, and who you think we gonna meet? iCarly. iCarly, right in Seattle. Thank you, Seattle. So what we're doing is like we take out our boppy blasters. We take out the boppy blasters and we just start bopping her. We just start bopping her with the boppy blasters. She's bopped and booped. So she's dead. And we take her place. We just take her place in the show. So like we just like extreme home makeover, the home edition. And like we just like change everything. We get rid of everyone except for like the big brother and just like replace the rest of the cast with the cast from Drake and Josh. So essentially the show is now Drake and Josh again. And then because of that, everybody loves us, right? And they're like, here, take our money. But we're like, I would, but I only accept caps. So we take all that money and we go to the place. What's it called? The Mojave Desert. And we're like, can you change this out with caps, bottle caps? And they're like, no. So we go to the strip, and we're like, dude, this stuff is worth actual money. And then D's like, waddle? And I'm like, yeah, it's worth actual money. So we go to the strip, and we're just having a blast, you know. We're gambling. We think we're making it big shots, and playing like bingo, and like the lottery, and then we get even more money, and we're like, what are we gonna do with all this money? And then Waddle Dee's like, waddle. I think you know what he means by that. So we do that, and then we leave. And that was pretty fun. So we actually ended up getting to keep the limo, and so we're riding that out of Las Vegas, right? And we're like, man, you know what does the exact same thing but better? Mexico. They got a drug trafficking trade out there, dude. That I am all about that. So we go down there, and we just show up like big shots, like we did in Las Vegas, and then freaking Breaking Man is like, who's this punk? So I'm like, yo, Mr. Breaking Man, I'ma let you finish. But we're taking over, so you gotta get out. You gotta get out of here. It's always like, shut up. So they leave, and then freaking Leonardo da Vinci is like, okay, now you're the big shot. What are you gonna do now, Mello? And I'm like, Mario Brothers. And then he's like, Leonardo da Vinci. So I'm like, but let's make a Mario game in IRL life. And then so we do, and like everybody is like, okay, how are we gonna do this? And I'm like, well, this is a massive undertaking, and you know what I'm saying. So we gotta get everybody, and I mean everybody. So like we get Michael Jackson Jordan, and like Carly, and like Drake and Josh, and like Breaking Man, and like everybody is back, and essentially we throw a concert, right? A concert with the Jonas Brothers. People show up, we have a good time, and then we just break like doubles. We get just enough money to like fund this. So we're like, okay, what we gotta do is we gotta get some platforms, you know what I'm saying? So King DD calls up freaking Platform and Co. I'm like, and I'm just like, hey, how's the platforms coming? And he's like, a waddle waddle. And I'm like, what do you mean? Waddle waddle? And I'm like, give me the phone. And then I'm like, yes, hello. And they're like, yes, sir. And I'm like, yes, what do you want? What's so hard to understand about waddle waddle? And they're like, well, you see, freaking, like, I don't think we have any of that in stock. And I'm like, what are you talking about? All we asked for was a waddle waddle. You're telling me you don't have a waddle waddle? And they're like, well, you see. So I go over there. I murderize everybody. I'm just not gonna have any of that. And it turns out, listen, hear this. Now, I'm looking through this place, desperately trying to find the supplies that we needed. Turns out they had waddle waddles in the very back. Like, they weren't even looking for them. They were just being complete jerks and not giving them to us. So I go load those up in the limousine, and I'm taking them back to our headquarters. And meanwhile, DDD calls me up, and he's like, yo, waddle waddle, a waddle waddle waddle. And I'm like, wait, really? And he's like, waddle waddle. And I'm like, we'll take care of it. And he's like, but waddle waddle waddle. And I'm like, I'll be over there soon. So I get over there, and just monkeys everywhere. Like, I don't even like it's like Ape Escape up in here. And I'm like, freaking, guys, what, who did this? And then King DDD is pointing to Joe Jonas, you know, the ugly one and the fat one. And I'm like, freaking, you're out of here. So I take a baseball bat and I'm like, about a swing, and I hit him all the way into the sky, and I hit the moon, and the moon starts crashing into the planet, and it's got like a face on it, and it's creepy, and I'm like, oh, gah. So I'm like, don't worry. So I take the limousine, and I'm like, DDD, make a ramp. So he takes all the waddle waddles and makes a ramp. And I'm like, let's do this. So I shoot up the ramp, and I go all the way to the moon, and I've landed on the surface, and like, freaking, I go into the, like, and I find the moon base, right? And I go inside the moon base, and like, but they don't want me there inside the moon base, the people that are on the moon base. So I'm going like around stealthing, like freaking, like James Bond, Metal Gear Bond style, and I'm like killing people and like launching an RPG at my feet, like, and I'm being really sneaky and like freaking just, and like I'm just like, okay, let's find the computer room. So I find the computer room, right? And like I'm in there, and like the guards, they know I'm there now though. Like I accidentally like tripped over the guard wire, so now all the guards are coming to shoot me. And I'm like, King DDD, and he's like, yup, waddle waddle. And I'm like, I need backup. So he buys another limousine and like shoots it up here, and it lands right next to me. And I'm like, who did you send? And he's like, waddle waddle. And I'm like, wait, I can't understand, you're breaking up. So I'm like, we gotta find who's in there, and we gotta get them out of here. So I go up there, and I'm like prying at the doors, but I can't get it open. I'm looking around for something to pry it open, and the only thing that I can find is a toothpick, but it's like a solid titany gold nickel copper alloy toothpick. So I just shove it in the door, and I rip it open, and then turned into a jelly bean. And then I ate the jelly bean, and I became a Weston man. And I'm like, a bada bing, a bada boom, bada let's go. So I take the moon crystal that powers the entire moon base, and I just shoot them with my laser vision through the crystal, which amplifies my powers by like a trillion million. And it just blows them up, blows them all up. And then they die. And I'm like, yeehaw. So I take the crashed limousine, and I'm like, baby, bada bing, let's bada get out of here. So I do like a crazy like drifty U-turn, and I'm like, let's go. And then I shoot out of there at like speed of light, but too fast, just too fast, too furious. And I end up ripping a hole in space-time, and I shoot into Sonic Racing! Everybody supersonic racing. So I land in the middle of a race, and I'm like, oh my god, we're in this place. How are we gonna get out of here, baby Waddle Dee? And he was kinda dead, so he couldn't say anything back. So I'm like, I'm drifting and drafting and racing, and I get that damn 4th Chaos Emerald. And I'm like, I won! So I won the race, and everybody was really proud of me. And like, I just felt so good about myself. And then I'm like, but I still gotta get out of here. So I take the crystal, and I'm like, if you guys don't find a way to get me out of here within about a month, I am going to blow us all up with this crystal. And they believed me. So essentially I enslaved the entire Sonic universe, like with one threat. And they didn't like try and oppose me at all. They just sort of took it. They're just like, well, okay then, let's go find a way to get him out of here. So they're like doing a bunch of stuff that I don't know about in the comics, and like a lot of like canon stuff that I'm not sure, and I'm not really sure about. So I start like, I'm like, and then like this one little Sonic OC, Darksteel?
Yeah, Darksteel.
Darksteel! So Darksteel, like, he goes all Django style on me, but the D is silent, but not his D, and he like blasts me, and I'm like, no! And he's like, yes, it is I, Darksteel! And I'm like, no, I knew it was you the whole time, because you were wearing a mask of yourself. And he's like, that's right. And with this mask, I'll fool the entire Sonic universe into thinking I'm the edgiest OC of them all. And I'm like, no, because you can't do that, because you see, I'm Darksteel! And then he's like, no! So then he takes off his mask, and he's me! And I'm like, I knew it was me the whole time! There's no way I wouldn't be the kick-ass underling that rises up and slays my master! So I shoot him with my D, because it's not silent! And like, he's dead now. So basically, I'm like, guys, I saved the Sonic universe. And then Sonic was like, you are my brother and also my husband, and I found a way to get you out of here. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. So I take the limousine, we just get out of there. But like, the thing is, they got me out of there technically, but they didn't really get me in the right place. So I'm in the Andromeda galaxy, far away from here. And I'm talking to like the other like planets that are in Andromeda that are like apparently like equivalent to ours, like the Andromeda Jupiter and like Andromeda Earth and I'm like, and I'm on Andromeda Earth, and I'm like, I'm talking to, like, my Andromeda self, and I'm like, Andromeda Weston, you gotta help me get Andromeda out of here. And he's like, but how can I do that when I'm already dead? So he stabs himself in the heart, and I'm like, no! Why? So he stabbed himself in the heart, and I'm like, I guess I'm gonna have to take his place. So I do, and I go to my Andromeda job, and I work at Andromeda Paper Mill, Andromeda Grill, and it sucks. Like, seriously though, it is a terrible job. Like, the hours are awful, like, the pay is worse, and the people I have to serve there are just so bad, like, on a basic human level. Anyways, so, like, I make it big. I become an Andromeda baseball player. I become Andromeda Babe, Andromeda Bane. So, I'm playing Bane ball. And I'm like, about to swing just like the last time I did it. And it hits the moon again. And I'm like, shit, I'm recycling stories. So I run the bases, and then I'm like, and I steal home. I just steal it, and I take it far away. And it turns out, the damn 4th Chaos Emerald was in there. And I'm like, I found it! Now I can power my limousine all the way back to the regular non-Andromeda Earth. So I'm like, see ya guys, I never liked you anyways. I stick it in there. But there's a malfunction. It doesn't run on that damn 4th Chaos Emerald. It runs on gasoline. Shit. So I'm like, so everybody looks at me and they're like, you never liked us? And the thing is, you know, about Andromeda people, you don't want to make them cry, because their tears are antimatter. So if they cry, I die. You know how it is. You know what they say. It's what I just said. If they cry, you die. So I'm like, don't cry. Happy Valentine's Day. And I give them a card, and it's like, oh, you got me a Valentine's Day card, and what's inside of it? $5! More than they've ever had in their entire lives. And I saved them from the depression of the 19 depressions. So I become the president, and I'm like, my first order as presidente is get me the hell out of here. So they're like, okie dokie, chokey, and then they start choking me, and I'm like, this isn't helping. God dang it. So I'm unconscious, right? And like, I find Leonardo da Vinci in there. Not the first one, or the Andromeda version, but like the one from the movies. And he's like, I was sent here to totally recall you. And I'm like, okay. So he's like, we have to go deeper and deeper into the dream in order to save you. And I'm like, yeah, I would, but you see, the problem with that is, this isn't my dream. And he's like, then whose is it? And I'm like, it's Furby's! And Furby was there, and he was just sitting there, staring at you, and me, and one big happy family. And we were like, no! We can't deal with this right now. We can't deal with this. So then, Mateus comes out of nowhere and chin thrusts into Furby. And we're like, thanks. And he's like, no problem. So But then the dream starts collapsing, and like, seriously, stop. So the dream starts collapsing, and he's like, we gotta get out of here. And I'm like, okay. So he takes out his ornithopter, and he's like, whee! And we fly out of the dream, Wu-Tang style. So I wake up, and he's there next to me, and I realize I'm in love. I'm in love. So we go on a romantic 50 years together through the Everglades, looking at sharks and shooting torpedoes. But then he remembered his girlfriend back from the 1960s. Her name was Ornithoptera. He named his ornithopter after her. And I'm like, do you want to talk about it, Leonardo? And he's like, no. Like in Spanish soap operas, how they like always like play guitar and stuff, and they're like really dramatic. It was like that, and he was playing a guitar, and I'm like, oh, because I kind of like I swooned and he caught me. So then he dumped me because he's a freaking bitch, and I'm like, I'm still president, and you're dead. So we killed him as like an entire like country. So then they're like, Weston, we gotta a way to get you out of here. And I'm like, oh really? And they're like, yeah, we have gasoline. And I'm like, oh. So we fly back to Earth, back to the normal Earth. And they had this big welcoming party, and like, everybody was there except for Leonardo, because he dumped me. So we were having a grand old time, and I see this woman, and I'm going through like my depression phase of the breakup, right? Where like I'm never gonna find myself a man like Leonardo. So I just look to my left, to the left, and I see this woman. And she is the ugliest thing that I have ever seen in my entire life, but I am in love with her. So I go sit down next to her and I'm like, can I buy you a drink? And she's like, no, can I buy you one? And I'm like, you made the wrong move, stupid bitch. And I buy everything in there, and I drink all of it, and I am wasted. And she's like, man, my wallet is empty. And I'm like, free alcohol on her! And everybody gets something, except for her, because she's broke. And then, like, they went up to him like, your tab is like a gazillions, you owe us for life, baby. And then she's like, I can't pay that. So she goes to prison. And so, like, we had a long distance relationship for a little while after that. And I'm still staying in touch with her, and we were talking for a while, and, well, I proposed to her during one of my visits to the prison, to the super prison, and I'm like, baby, I love you, let's get married. So she's like, okay, to her prison cell. I mean, at least I thought she said okay. Her voice was kind of muffled because it's a prison cell after all. I mean, it's hard to hear through those solitary confinement doors. So I start putting together the wedding, and I'm putting together the guest list and the decorations. And since, like, she's in prison, they have to use my body as a model for the dress. And I hope it fit her, I don't really know. Because, you see, the thing is, we got married on Skype. We got married over Skype. It was a nice reception. Everybody was on their Skype. It was very convenient for everybody. And then we essentially lived happily ever after while she was in prison and I was a gazillionaire. The